Hey everyone, David McGinley here at the IANS conference in Phoenix, Arizona. Now, this conference is about near-death experiences, of course, but equally important is supporting a person with compassion and wisdom and insight as they're approaching death so that they have a smooth takeoff that doesn't need to be marked by as much existential fear as most of us imagine it will be. So, really happy to be sitting with Dr. Elaine Drysdale now. If you could go over your credentials, because you just told them to me, but it's long and I think I'm going to forget it.
Well, I'm a clinical professor in the Faculty of Medicine
Right.
at University of British Columbia, and I'm in the Department of Psychiatry. But most of my work has involved working on medical wards or in medical situations with people with life-threatening illnesses such as cancer, leukemia, bone marrow transplant.
And you've been doing that
issues.
for over 3 decades.
Absolutely.
Right. So
I hate to acknowledge how long. Hopefully I've acquired some wisdom, at least experience.
well, let's talk about how that wisdom is applied through a patient story, right?
Well, it needn't be complicated when we're talking to people about dying. And I think society, where people are afraid to broach the topic with relatives. I know even with all my experience, I thought at times when my parents were dying, oh, shouldn't I be doing something more or saying something more profound? And so it's easier to do when you think about it than sometimes at the bedside. But what I have found is that when I've asked for spiritual help, that the right words and the right actions come in, and it's usually very simple. Something, a simple phrase or just a few things and that resonate with the person. I'm going to give you an example. A friend of mine got a text saying, this is Bill here, and since we talked a few months ago, my illness has really progressed, and actually I'm in hospice now. And could you come over and bring some, we'll have a Last Supper together.
Oh.
And so my friend was a little bit unsure what to say. He knew this man had been a devout Christian, and that the man had lost his daughter at a tragic early age many years before. So I texted my friend and I said, well, what you could say is, how do you feel about the situation and what's happening? And then go on to say, you know, I've heard stories of people who've been resuscitated and brought back to life. And from what we know about those experiences is that the actual time of dying is very peaceful, no matter what it might look to others. And it raises a lot of spiritual suggestions, which people may or may not accept. But we know that the actual time of passing is peaceful.
It really is staggering that we live in an age when we have the data to support that, when near-death experiences are so common. And I want to highlight what you just said, that as tragic and traumatic as it may look to someone watching another person die, you're saying for that person, it's like a circuit breaker kicks in. Do they detach? Do they feel peace?
Well, I often tell people about the story of a man, Daniel Brinkley, who was electrocuted. And from the exterior, it must have looked horrific, the jolt, etc. But what he described was he just felt such an incredible sense of peace going down a tunnel. He heard chimes, and he said it was the most orderly experience, and that it felt so right and loving. And he did see his body from afar and sort of thought, well, I thought I was more handsome than that. But but the key thing was that he felt peaceful no matter what it looked on the outside. And I have used that story with clinically with people. One example is a man whose teenage son was very ill, and who came towards him and collapsed in his arms of a heart attack. And the poor father relived that scene over and over to the degree of post-traumatic stress. And he felt sure that his son must have really suffered. So I was able to tell him about near-death experiences, and even though the man was an atheist at the time, and I said, what we know is that it's very peaceful on the inside. And so your son probably felt great peace at that moment. He was in the arms of someone who loved him, surrounded by love on this side, surrounded by love on the next side. Wow. And that, I also said, it's kind of like childbirth. And a mother who's given birth at the time is aware of it, but years later she's not dwelling over and over and over about that transition time of the birth. And the same for his son. We assume it was very peaceful and he felt loved at the time, but he would not still be dwelling on the horrific aspects. So that gave the father hope. He got very interested in near-death experiences, and later lent me a video about it, and he was no longer an atheist from that story.
So you had shared this hope that it's not as traumatic, it could even be peaceful. Like you were saying to this gentleman, you could talk to your friend about this as you bring him supper. And
so what I texted my friend was, this is what you can say.
Yeah.
You know, what we know from people who've come as close as you can get to dying and still talk about it is that it's peaceful. And because I knew the man was Christian, I added, there are many Christians who've had these near-death experiences, and some describe meeting Jesus, some describe seeing the city of crystal, which is described in the book of Revelations in the Bible. And he would be what we know is that he would be welcomed by his daughter who had died years ago. There would be a great party, a great celebration. He'd be able to hug her.
wow.
And to tell this, and I also wrote, tell him that the one time I met him briefly, I enjoyed it and I wish him all the best, and that he'll be surrounded by love. So my friend read this to him. The man sat back with tears rolling down his face, but with this beautiful smile. And what I hadn't known was that, when I said that he would be seeing his daughter, he imagined greeting her and hugging her, but all of a sudden he was reconciled back in his faith, because after his daughter had died years before, he questioned his faith. How could a loving God give him such pain? And so he'd become somewhat estranged from God, but the thought of seeing his daughter meant that he would no longer need to be estranged from God, and it resolved a question of faith for him,
Right.
and he would be loved by God. And so all was well. He'd see his daughter, and he was reconciled with God, and he was able to die a few days later so peacefully. Now my friend felt so empowered seeing this. He thought, oh my goodness, this little text is creating such an emotional reaction. And months later, the son told my friend his father had talked about that and how it made all the difference. So,
yeah, the hope not only of a peaceful death, but that we won't be alone, we'll be reunited, and that a welcoming party of your loved ones who have passed on is so commonly reported. It's practically universal throughout cultures. Here you are, Department of Psychiatry, medical professional, well versed on the phenomenon. At the pivotal point, the final chapter of their life, to give something deeper than medicine, to give true hope, right, and joy.
and it can be so simple.
Right.
You know, we ask for help. I think that the divine channeled through me to say the right words in the text.
Yeah.
To my friend, to say the things that exactly hit the heart of that dying man.
Well, gee, I wish that happened to me every Sunday, but it can be hit and miss on Sunday.
I wish it happened to me more often too.
Yeah.
You know, but it can be simple. We can ask people, do you see people that you love that have gone on before, or
Yeah.
people that you know? And people will say, well, actually, I've been having dreams of my brother who died a few years ago. Or in my own mother's case, she suddenly smiled a few hours before she died. And I said, Mom, do you see anybody you know? And she said, and she nodded.
Right.
And I said, do you see your parents?
Right.
Do you see my dad? Do you see your parents? Double check.
Yeah.
As a scientist, just verify it. No, but you see Dad?
Yeah.
Huge grin. And I said, well, he's coming to welcome you, and you're going to go over, and what a party you're going to have later tonight. There's going to be a great celebration, and that was that.
Right. So if you have a loved one who's approaching the end of life, if you're reflecting back on a loved one who died, if you're struggling in what to say, how to support someone who's dying, I hope that this video helps. Keep it simple, keep your heart open, breathe into it, and let the tears and the laughter mix together. And
Yes.
as astonishing as it sounds, trust that grace will carry you through and grace will receive you on the other side. And it's all going to be okay. Whatever you're facing, I can't imagine what some of you may be facing. Reach out for support. Your psychosocial team around you, a pastor, a chaplain, a good friend, anyone who will sit and just listen, talk about your feelings, and then have honest, tender, loving, beautiful conversations with those who are about to be undergoing that transformation. Thank you, Elaine.
It's been such a pleasure and an honor
Yeah.
to talk with you.
It's been great
I
to
have so
see you.
much respect for you over the years. We've met at various times, conferences, and this has been fabulous to connect with you again this time.
You're a part of my story too, and I'm so grateful. Okay.
Thanks.
Take care.